What if the parent who abandoned you returned, but as someone you never expected? Elias knew from the moment he opened his eyes that his life was different, not just because the world around him felt strange and new, but because deep inside, buried beneath the layers of childhood innocence, pulsed a secret too heavy for a boy so young to carry. He was no ordinary child, reborn into a life that wasn't his own, living among people who loved him yet unknowingly mourned a son they lost. Elias was the embodiment of a father's regret and a family's fractured past. And though he wore the face of a new beginning, his heart beat with the memories of what once was. A love broken by abandonment, a promise shattered by fear. On this cold, rain-soaked evening, Elias sat by the window of the Marcellus home, watching droplets race down the glass like tears he wasn't allowed to shed. The house was warm, filled with the comforting hum of family life, laughter from the kitchen, the faint scent of roasted chicken, and the soft thud of footsteps overhead where his younger sister, Lila, was tucked safely in bed. But beneath this peaceful surface, Elias's mind swirled with questions only he could hear. How do you fix a family torn apart by absence? How do you reclaim a love lost to time and silence? His fingers traced the edge of an old photograph resting on the mantelpiece, a frozen moment of a family he barely remembered but instinctively longed for. A mother with eyes full of hope. A father with hands that once held his own. A little girl with laughter like sunshine. That family was gone. And yet, it was his. The truth was a secret he guarded fiercely, the reason he was here, and the weight he carried alone. Elias was the lost parent's return, reborn as a family friend's child, silently striving to heal wounds he never meant to open, while hiding the truth that could either save them all or shatter everything. Tonight, the storm outside mirrored the one inside his heart. A storm he knew he had to face, because some secrets refused to stay buried forever. The morning sun struggled through thick gray clouds as Elias stood silently by the kitchen doorway, watching his adoptive mother, Anne Marcellus, move about with a practiced grace. The scent of fresh bread mingled with the earthy aroma of brewing coffee, filling the room with a familiar comfort that still, somehow, never quite reached his heart. Anne looked up and smiled, a smile so warm, so genuine, it should have been enough to thaw any chill. But Elias felt a knot tighten deep within his chest. How many times had she smiled like this? How many times had her kindness made him wonder whether the secret he carried could ever be forgiven? "Elias, come help me set the table," she said softly, as if sensing the storm behind his silence. He stepped forward, careful not to disturb the fragile peace that hovered between them. Their home was a sanctuary in many ways, a refuge for a boy who had been handed a life not of his choosing, raised by people who loved him yet unknowingly mourned another. The Marcellus family was a patchwork quilt of stories stitched together by love and loss. Marcellus, his adoptive father, was a quiet man of few words but fierce devotion. His steady presence was a silent anchor in Elias's turbulent world, but even he carried scars from the past, scars no one spoke of. And then there was Lila, Elias's younger sister, whose laughter was the one pure thing in his life. She had no knowledge of the shadows that clung to her brother like a second skin. To her, Elias was simply her protective older brother, her hero in every scraped knee and scary dream. As breakfast was laid out, the golden eggs, thick slices of toast, and bowls of sweet fruit, Elias watched his family with a secret longing. They were real. They were his. And yet, he was not truly theirs. At school that day, Elias navigated the halls with practiced ease, masking the tempest that raged inside. His classmates knew him as the quiet boy with a sharp mind and a reserved smile. But beneath that calm exterior lurked a complexity few could guess at. His best friend, Jonah Harper, was the only person with whom Elias shared fragments of his true self. Jonah's easy laughter and careless confidence were a balm to Elias's restless soul, yet even their friendship carried an unspoken tension. Jonah's family had once been intertwined with Elias's original one, the family Elias had been torn from. Jonah often talked about his father's long talks with Elias's biological father, about fishing trips and barbecues that Elias could only glimpse through faded memories. One afternoon, beneath the towering oaks that lined the school's backfield, Jonah asked, "Do you ever wonder why your parents never talk about the old days?" Elias hesitated, the question slicing through his carefully constructed walls. I don't know, he said finally, voice barely above a whisper. Maybe some things are better left forgotten. Jonah frowned, sensing the weight behind his friend's words. But don't you want to know? I mean, it's weird, like your family. It's different. My parents say your dad just left one day. No warning, no goodbye. Elias swallowed hard. That was the truth he'd been running from, and now it was chasing him in daylight. They don't know the whole story, Elias said softly, turning his gaze to the horizon where the sun fought through clouds. Sometimes people leave because they think it's the only way to protect the ones they love. Jonah looked at him, puzzled but respectful. That sounds complicated. It is, Elias admitted. Back at home, the silence between Elias and his adoptive parents was thick but unspoken. Marcellus sat in his worn leather chair, eyes scanning the evening news with practiced detachment, while Anne busied herself tidying the living room. Elias felt the urge to speak, to finally unburden himself, but the words tangled in his throat. Instead, he reached beneath his bed and pulled out a small, worn box, his treasure chest of secrets. Inside were letters, yellowed and fragile, written by his biological father to his mother before he vanished. Letters full of apology, regret, and love he had never received. Reading them by the dim light of his bedside lamp, Elias learned the man's truth, the shame of failure, the fear of hurting his family, and the overwhelming weight of mistakes that drove him away. "I'm sorry," Elias whispered into the darkness, his breath trembling. "I'm sorry for all the years lost, for all the pain." But even as he spoke, he knew the path to forgiveness would be long and uncertain. That night, sleep eluded Elias. Memories flooded his mind, his mother's gentle lullabies, his father's firm but loving grip on his shoulder, the little sister's laughter echoing in sunlit rooms that now only existed in dreams. He rose quietly and walked to the window. The rain had stopped, leaving the world washed clean and glistening under a silver moon. In that stillness, Elias made a silent vow. "I will find a way to make this right, not as a ghost from the past, but as the son who stayed. I will fill the empty spaces with love, because sometimes the lost don't just return. They fight for a future they never had." The sun was just beginning its slow descent, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, when Elias found himself wandering the streets of the old neighborhood, the very place where his original family had once lived. It was a part of town he had never been allowed to visit before, a quiet district where time seemed to linger in the cracked pavement and faded paint of familiar doorways. Elias's heart thudded unevenly with each step. This was the home he never truly had but had yearned for in the silence of his nights. The street was almost deserted, save for a few elderly neighbors sitting on stoops, exchanging greetings and watching the world pass with knowing eyes. He paused in front of a modest two-story house with peeling white paint and a small garden overrun with wildflowers and weeds. The porch swing creaked in the gentle breeze, swaying as if moved by ghosts of memories past. This house, their house, was now empty, or so he thought. Suddenly, the door opened, and a woman stepped out, her eyes widening slightly as she saw Elias standing there. Her hair was streaked with gray, her face etched with lines of both hardship and resilience. She looked at him with a mixture of surprise, recognition, and something else. Hesitation. "Can I help you, young man?" she asked, her voice soft but wary. Elias swallowed the lump in his throat, gathering courage. I'm just passing by. I used to live here a long time ago." The woman's eyes flickered with a spark of memory, but she said nothing at first. Then, as if deciding something important, she smiled faintly. "I'm Mrs. Green. I used to look after the house when the family was away." Elias nodded, feeling the weight of unspoken history between them. "My name is Elias. I don't know if you remember my family, the Parkers." Mrs. Green's expression softened. "Of course I do. Your parents were good people, but life dealt them a hard hand. I've often wondered what happened to you all after your father left." Elias's throat tightened. I've been trying to find answers. Back at the Marcellus home, life carried on with its usual rhythm, but for Elias, each moment was a reminder of the invisible ties that bound him to a past he was only beginning to understand. Anne noticed the change in him, the way his eyes darkened with a quiet sorrow, the way he sometimes drifted into silence during family dinners. One evening, after tucking Lila into bed, Anne found Elias sitting by the window, staring out at the moonlit garden. She sat beside him, her voice gentle. "Elias, honey, you've been distant lately. What's on your mind?" He hesitated, then spoke quietly. "I visited my old home today, the place where I was born. It felt strange, like a piece of me was waiting there." Anne reached out, taking his hand in hers. "I know it's hard. You carry a heavy burden." Elias looked into her eyes, seeing unconditional love and understanding. "I want to make things right, but I don't even know how." Anne squeezed his hand. "Sometimes healing starts with small steps. Being present, showing love, the rest will follow." Elias's thoughts often drifted to Jonah, his best friend and unwitting link to the past he couldn't fully claim. One weekend, Marcellus suggested Elias join him on a visit to the Harper family, a chance to reconnect and perhaps find pieces of the puzzle that had long eluded him. The Harper home was lively, filled with warmth and the sounds of conversation. Jonah greeted Elias with a wide grin, but it was Mr. Harper, Jonah's father, who held the key to truths buried deep. Sitting in the study, surrounded by old photographs and letters, Mr. Harper spoke candidly. "Your father was a good man," he said quietly, "but he was haunted by mistakes and fears. When he left, it shattered more than just your family. It broke all of us." Elias listened, absorbing every word. "Did he ever try to come back?" Mr. Harper shook his head sadly. "No, not in the way you'd hope. But maybe now, through you, there's a chance for redemption." That night, Elias lay awake, wrestling with conflicting emotions. He was the embodiment of his father's regrets, yet he was also a boy with his own dreams, his own future. Could he carry the weight of both identities? Could he truly be the bridge between past and present, healing and heartbreak? Tears welled in his eyes, not just for the lost years, but for the hope flickering faintly in the distance. He whispered into the darkness, "I won't run away. I will fight for the family I lost and the one I have now." The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Marcellus household, filtering through the lace curtains and splashing golden light onto the worn wooden floorboards. Yet inside Elias's room, the warm glow did little to chase away the chill that had settled deep in his chest. He sat on the edge of his bed, a leather-bound journal open on his lap. The pages were filled with words he dared not speak aloud, confessions scribbled in hurried script, the tangled web of lies and truths he wove every day to protect his secret and the family that had unknowingly taken him in. To the world, Elias was just a boy like any other, a good student, a dutiful son, a loyal friend. But beneath the carefully crafted facade was a relentless storm of guilt, fear, and yearning. How did one live as two people at once? How could he smile while carrying the weight of abandonment and betrayal? The questions haunted him like shadows in the corners of his mind. His biological father's abandonment was not just a story told in whispers behind closed doors. It was a living, breathing wound. Elias remembered the ache of empty rooms, the echo of footsteps fading into silence, and the burning question that refused to fade. Why did he leave? Now, living as the son of the Marcellus family, a family that had embraced him with open arms but whose own scars ran deep, Elias was caught in an impossible balance. He longed to reveal himself, to bridge the gap between past and present, but feared the devastation it might cause. Outside Elias's bedroom window, the world moved on. Anne was in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared dinner. Marcellus was in his study, reading by the dim light of a desk lamp. Lila played quietly in the living room, her laughter a balm to the house. Yet, unknown to them, Elias was an outsider within, a silent watcher caught between two worlds. He flipped through the pages of his journal, eyes lingering on a passage he had written that morning. "I want to be forgiven, but I must first forgive myself." Forgiveness, the elusive key to his salvation. Days later, Elias found himself walking alongside Jonah in the school's quiet library, their usual haunt for secret conversations and shared homework sessions. The weight of his secret pressed heavier with each passing moment, until he finally whispered, "Jonah, there's something I need to tell you." Jonah looked up, his brow furrowed with concern. "You can tell me anything, Elias." Taking a deep breath, Elias began to unravel the truth, carefully, slowly, revealing his true identity as the reincarnation of the father who had abandoned his family. For a moment, Jonah sat stunned, eyes wide with disbelief. Then, slowly, he reached out and clasped Elias's hand. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "I was scared. Scared of losing you. Scared of what it might do to everyone." Jonah nodded, his voice steady. "You're still my friend, and I want to help." But the fragile peace was soon shattered. At a Sunday family dinner, tensions simmered beneath polite conversation. Marcellus's eyes lingered on Elias with a hint of suspicion. Anne's smiles faltered when questions about the past arose, and Lila's innocent chatter was punctuated by uneasy silences. When Elias accidentally mentioned a childhood memory that only his biological family could have known, a hush fell over the table. Marcellus's gaze hardened. "Where did you hear that?" Elias swallowed hard, caught in a web of half-truths. I just remembered," he said, voice barely audible. The moment stretched taut like a snapping thread. That night, Elias lay awake, heart pounding. The secret was unraveling, and with it, the delicate bonds holding his new life together. In the stillness of the early morning, Elias made a decision. He would no longer live in shadows. He would face the family he loved, with all the truth, all the pain, and all the hope he carried inside. Because sometimes, the only way to heal is to break the silence. The morning air was heavy with anticipation, as Elias stood before the familiar doorway of the Marcellus living room. Every heartbeat echoed like a drum in his chest, reverberating with the weight of the confession he was about to make. Inside, the family gathered, sensing the unspoken tension that had crept into their lives like an unwelcome shadow. Elias took a deep breath, the words burning on his tongue. This was the moment to finally shatter the silence and reveal the truth that had shaped his very existence. "I need to tell you all something," he began, voice trembling but resolute. Marcellus's eyes narrowed, Anne's hand gripped Lila's gently, and Jonah, sitting quietly in the corner, gave a small encouraging nod. Elias looked each of them in the eye. "I'm not who you think I am. I'm the son of the man who left you all years ago. I was given another chance at life, but the past is still with me. I've hidden this secret because I was afraid of losing you." A silence so profound it seemed to still time itself filled the room. Anne's eyes welled with tears. Marcellus's jaw clenched tightly, and Lila's small hand reached out to grasp Elias's. Jonah's voice broke the stillness. "Elias, you don't have to carry this alone anymore." Marcellus finally spoke, his voice heavy with a mixture of pain and hope. "Why now? After all this time?" Elias swallowed. "Because I can't live a lie. Because I want to heal what was broken, not just for me but for all of us." The room seemed to breathe together, fragile and tentative. Anne stepped forward, embracing Elias with a tenderness that spoke of forgiveness and the possibility of new beginnings. "Family isn't just blood," she whispered. "It's love, trust, and the courage to forgive." As the afternoon sun cast warm light over their faces, the fractured family began the slow, painful journey toward healing, one honest word at a time. The days that followed Elias's confession felt like walking on thin ice, each step filled with uncertainty, hope, and fear. The Marcellus household, once a place of quiet routine, became a crucible for emotions long buried beneath years of silence and unspoken pain. Anne tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but her eyes betrayed the storm within. She spent long nights awake, wrestling with feelings of betrayal and compassion. How could she reconcile the boy she'd raised as her own with the secret that threatened to unravel their entire family? Marcellus, stoic as ever, struggled to find words. The man who once guarded his heart with iron walls now faced the greatest challenge of all, forgiveness. His gaze softened only when he looked at Elias, seeing not the ghost of the past but a young soul desperate to make things right. Lila, unaware of the full truth but sensing the tension, clung tightly to Elias, her innocent love a beacon of light in the darkness. Together, they began the slow work of rebuilding trust, each conversation a brick laid carefully in the foundation of their fragile new family. Elias attended counseling with Anne and Marcellus, navigating the complex emotions that surfaced like buried tides. The sessions were raw and painful, but also healing. One afternoon, Anne held Elias's hand as she whispered, "We can't change the past, but we can shape the future. And I believe in that future, with you." Jonah remained a steadfast friend, his loyalty unwavering even as the family's secrets unfolded. He stood by Elias, helping him carry the burden and reminding him that he was not alone. School became a place of refuge and challenge, where Elias grappled with his identity amidst whispers and curious glances. But with Jonah's support and growing confidence, he began to find his voice. The road to healing was far from straight or smooth. There were days of anger, doubt, and setbacks. But within those struggles blossomed a deeper understanding, a shared commitment to move forward, to forgive, and to love despite the scars. One evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, Elias looked around at the faces filled with cautious hope. For the first time in a long while, he felt a flicker of peace. He knew the journey ahead would be difficult, but also that it was theirs to take, together. The quiet after the storm was deceptive. While the Marcellus household seemed calmer on the surface, beneath the calm simmered unresolved tensions and memories clawing to be heard. Elias found himself wrestling with the ghosts of his former life more fiercely than ever. Late at night, when the world outside had fallen silent, he often sat by the window, staring at the stars, trying to make sense of the tangled threads of his identity. Who was he truly? The boy he had been reborn as? Or the man who had fled and left behind so much pain? One chilly autumn evening, a knock came at the door. Elias's heart skipped. Unexpected visitors were rare, and this one bore a weight unlike any before. Standing on the doorstep was Mrs. Green, the elderly woman who had once cared for his childhood home. Her eyes held a mixture of sorrow and determination. "I heard about your revelation," she said softly. "There are things you need to know, things that might help you understand." Elias invited her in, and over tea, she began to share stories, fragments of his biological family's struggles, the sacrifices his mother had made, and the unseen battles his father fought. Each tale peeled back another layer of the past, revealing not just pain, but also enduring love. Meanwhile, Marcellus and Anne grappled with their own fears. Could they truly accept Elias's past? Would the community judge them? Would Lila understand? Their quiet conversations at night were filled with uncertainty, but also with a growing resolve to protect the family they had built. Jonah, sensing Elias's turmoil, planned a small gathering with close friends, an effort to remind Elias that he was surrounded by those who cared. Laughter and warmth filled the room, and for a moment, Elias allowed himself to breathe freely, to be just a boy, not a secret or a shadow. Elias knew the path would not be easy. Old wounds would reopen, and new challenges would arise. But with every step, every honest conversation, and every act of forgiveness, the fragile tapestry of family grew stronger. In the quiet moments between heartbeats, Elias dared to hope, not just for redemption, but for a future where past and present could coexist in harmony. The soft glow of the living room lamp cast long shadows across the walls of the Marcellus home, but within, tensions simmered like a barely contained flame. The fragile peace that had been painstakingly built over weeks now trembled under the weight of truths left unspoken and fears unaddressed. Elias sat at the dinner table, the clatter of cutlery and murmurs of conversation failing to penetrate the growing silence between the family members. His mind raced, memories intertwining with present realities, and a heavy question refused to be silenced. Could forgiveness truly erase years of abandonment? It began subtly, a glance here, a sigh there, until one evening, Marcellus's patience frayed. "You've been distant," Marcellus said, his voice low but firm. "You hide behind walls, Elias. How can we help if you don't let us in?" Elias looked up, his eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I'm scared," he admitted. "Scared that no matter what I do, I won't be enough." Anne reached across the table, her hand covering his. "You are enough. More than enough." But the cracks in their armor had begun to show. The next day, an unexpected argument between Elias and Jonah at school left both boys shaken. Words were exchanged, words born from frustration, fear, and misunderstood intentions. Jonah accused Elias of pushing everyone away, while Elias confessed his struggle to reconcile the boy he was with the man he felt inside. It was a painful confrontation, but one that forced both to confront their own vulnerabilities. That evening, Elias retreated to the attic, a space filled with relics of the past, forgotten photographs, and dusty keepsakes. He pulled out an old family album and traced the faces of people who had shaped his life long before he understood their importance. As tears streamed down his face, he whispered a promise to himself: "I will not let this family fall apart. I will fight for us." Back downstairs, Anne and Marcellus shared a quiet moment, acknowledging their own fears but renewing their commitment to support Elias. "Family isn't perfect," Anne said softly. "But it's worth fighting for." Marcellus nodded, his eyes reflecting a mixture of hope and determination. The next morning brought a tentative calm. Elias and Jonah met beneath the ancient oak tree in the schoolyard, where apologies were exchanged and a fragile bond reaffirmed. They knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but together, they were ready to face whatever came next. The soft hum of the city outside was a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling within Elias's chest. The days were growing shorter, and the crisp autumn air carried with it a promise of change, a promise that mirrored the crossroads at which Elias now stood. He had confessed his truth. He had faced suspicion and pain. Yet the hardest battle lay ahead, forging a new identity that honored both the past and the present, without fracturing the fragile bonds that held his family together. At school, whispers followed Elias like shadows. Some classmates looked at him with newfound curiosity, others with thinly veiled judgment. The revelation of his origins was a secret no longer, and it complicated everything. Jonah remained his anchor, but even their friendship was tested as Elias wrestled with his place in a world that refused simple answers. One afternoon, as they sat beneath the sprawling branches of the oak tree, Elias confided, "Sometimes I wonder if I'm betraying the family I've known by honoring the one I came from." Jonah's gaze was steady. "You're not betraying anyone. You're just trying to find where you belong." In the weeks that followed, Mrs. Green's visits became more frequent. Her stories painted a fuller picture of Elias's biological family, their joys, their struggles, their love that had never truly faded. One evening, she handed Elias a faded envelope, worn at the edges. "This was your mother's," she said gently. "She wanted you to have it when the time was right." Inside was a letter filled with words of hope, forgiveness, and an unbreakable bond that death and absence could not sever. Elias clutched the letter to his heart, tears blurring his vision. For the first time, he felt a connection that transcended time. Back home, tensions between Marcellus and Elias reached a breaking point. The silent distance between father and son grew, filled with unspoken fears and wounded pride. One night, after a particularly cold exchange, Marcellus finally broke the silence. "I don't know if I can ever fully understand what you're going through," he admitted. "But I want to. I want to be your father, not just in name." Elias's voice cracked. "I want that too." The walls between them began to crumble, brick by painful brick. With the arrival of winter came a quiet transformation. The family, bruised but resilient, began to find strength in vulnerability and honesty. Lila's laughter grew louder, filling the home with light. Anne's smiles returned, warmer and more genuine. Marcellus and Elias shared moments of tentative trust, learning to navigate a relationship reborn from pain and hope. Elias, holding both his past and present close, stepped forward into the unknown. Winter had settled quietly over the town, coating streets and rooftops with a soft blanket of snow. The chill in the air was a reminder that, like the season, life too must endure cold, dark moments before the promise of renewal. For Elias and the Marcellus family, this season marked a turning point, an opportunity to heal wounds that had long been left open. The mornings grew slower, filled with shared breakfasts and lingering conversations that once would have been impossible. Elias found comfort in the simple routine of family life, though beneath the surface, old fears still threatened to rise. One morning, Anne approached Elias in the kitchen, her eyes bright with a mix of resolve and tenderness. "Your father's letter. It changed something in all of us," she said softly. "It reminded me that love doesn't erase pain, but it gives us a reason to keep trying." Elias nodded, the weight of those words settling deep in his heart. It was a reminder that forgiveness was not a single act but a journey walked slowly, step by fragile step. Marcellus, once guarded and distant, began to open himself to Elias. They spent evenings by the fire, talking, not about the past, but about the future, about hopes, fears, and the complicated love that bound them. "I won't pretend to have all the answers," Marcellus admitted one night, "but I want to be here. For you. For this family." Elias reached out, his hand finding Marcellus's. "That means everything." Unexpectedly, a letter arrived from a distant relative of Elias's biological mother, offering to reconnect and share more stories. This new connection stirred a mix of excitement and apprehension, opening doors to a past still partly shrouded in mystery. Mrs. Green helped Elias navigate these new relationships, guiding him gently through the delicate balance of honoring his roots while embracing his present. Winter holidays brought the family closer. Around the decorated tree, laughter and warmth replaced the silence that had once filled the rooms. Lila's bright eyes sparkled as she helped Elias hang ornaments, unaware of the deeper significance the season now held. Elias stood quietly, watching the family he fought so hard to protect. He knew the road ahead would still be difficult, but the shadows no longer held the same power over him. As snowflakes drifted softly outside the window, Elias made a silent vow to carry both his past and present with courage, to build bridges instead of walls, and to live a life defined not by abandonment, but by the unbreakable bonds of love and redemption. The lost parent had returned, not as a ghost of mistakes but as a living, breathing hope for the future. The fragile peace Elias and his family had fought so hard to build was about to be tested like never before. The news arrived on a brisk morning, carried by an envelope stamped with unfamiliar handwriting. It was a summons, an invitation to confront the past in a way Elias had long feared. Inside was a letter from a lawyer, representing his biological father, who had finally surfaced after years of silence. The man wanted to meet, not just as a client, but as a father seeking reconciliation. The revelation sent shockwaves through the Marcellus household. Marcellus's jaw tightened, Anne's eyes filled with tears, and Lila clung to Elias with wide, uncertain eyes. Elias grappled with conflicting emotions, hope, fear, anger, and a desperate longing for closure. Jonah stood firmly by his side, offering silent support, as Elias prepared to face the man who had once walked away. The day of the meeting arrived with a cold, gray sky. Elias entered a modest office, heart pounding. Across the table sat his father, older, wearier, but unmistakably the man from the letters and memories. Words stumbled out, raw and unguarded. Apologies mingled with explanations, regrets weighed heavy on both. "I was lost," his father admitted. "But I never stopped loving you." Elias listened, tears welling. Forgiveness felt distant, but not impossible. Back home, Elias shared the encounter with Anne and Marcellus. The family, still fragile, began to understand the complexity of forgiveness, not as forgetting, but as choosing to move forward. As winter thawed into spring, Elias felt a renewed sense of purpose. The shadows of abandonment no longer defined him. He was more than his past. He was a son, a brother, a friend, and a beacon of hope for a family reborn. Spring breathed life into the world outside the Marcellus home. Blossoms unfurled their petals, and the once stark branches now carried the promise of growth and renewal. Inside, the family felt the stirring of something new, a fragile but powerful hope. Elias stood in the garden with Lila, watching her chase butterflies with unbridled joy. He felt a warmth spread through his chest, a quiet contentment born not from perfection, but from acceptance. Anne joined them, her smile radiant. "Look at you two," she said softly. "Building memories, healing together." Marcellus arrived from the house, placing a steady hand on Elias's shoulder. "We've come a long way," he said, eyes glistening with pride. "And there's still so much ahead." In the weeks that followed, Elias wrote letters to his biological father, not just seeking answers, but offering forgiveness and a chance at rebuilding their fractured relationship. He understood now that forgiveness wasn't a one-time act, but an ongoing journey, a gift both given and received. The Marcellus family grew stronger, united by love that had weathered storms of silence, fear, and doubt. Each member learned to embrace vulnerability, to communicate openly, and to cherish the fragile bonds that held them together. Jonah remained Elias's steadfast friend, a constant reminder that family was not always defined by blood, but by loyalty and heart. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of colors, Elias sat quietly, reflecting on his journey, from lost child to found son, from silence to voice. He realized that while the past had shaped him, it did not define him. His future was unwritten, a canvas waiting for the strokes of hope, courage, and love. With a deep breath, Elias smiled. He was home. The morning began like any other, with golden sunlight filtering softly through the curtains of the Marcellus home. But the calm shattered the instant the mail slipped through the door, a thick, unmarked envelope resting ominously among the usual letters and bills. Elias's fingers trembled as he pulled it out. There was no sender, no explanation, only the weight of uncertainty. Inside, carefully folded and worn by time, were photographs. Black and white, grainy, yet unmistakably real. Images of his biological father, John Parker, caught in moments no one had ever spoken of. Furtive meetings in shadowed alleys, whispered exchanges with unknown faces, and hurried glances over a shoulder that betrayed paranoia. His heart pounded. These were not the images of a man who simply walked away, but of a man entangled in something far darker and more complex. Questions flooded Elias's mind like a storm. What was he running from? Was his father's departure an act of cowardice, or of desperate protection? Determined to uncover the truth, Elias began to piece together fragments from old letters tucked away in Mrs. Green's attic, rumors whispered among distant relatives, and records hidden beneath layers of dust and silence. Each discovery pulled him deeper into a maze of secrets that threatened not only his understanding of the past, but the safety of the family he had fought so hard to rebuild. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the town, Elias realized the past was no longer a ghost to be feared, but a force alive and dangerously close. And he was caught in its grasp. The weight of the photographs pressed heavily on Elias's conscience. But what came next was a blow he never saw coming. It was a quiet evening when Elias overheard a hushed conversation between Anne and a familiar voice, soft, urgent, and laced with guilt. He crept closer, heart pounding, as the words spilled out like poison. "You never told them the truth about John," Anne said, voice trembling. "I was trying to protect them," the voice replied. "If they knew what really happened, it would destroy everything." Elias's breath caught. The voice belonged to Mr. Caldwell, a longtime family friend who had been like an uncle to him, a man trusted implicitly by the Marcellus family. Betrayal sliced through Elias's heart. The next confrontation was inevitable. In the privacy of the study, Elias faced Mr. Caldwell. The man's eyes, usually warm and reassuring, now flickered with shame. "Why did you lie?" Elias demanded, voice shaking with anger and hurt. Mr. Caldwell lowered his gaze. "Because some truths are too dangerous. Your father was involved in things beyond his control, things I feared would put you all in harm's way." The revelation shattered Elias's trust, but also explained the shadows that had haunted his family for years. The path to forgiveness was fraught with pain. Could Elias and the Marcellus family accept the betrayal, understand its motivations, and rebuild their bonds stronger than before? In the quiet aftermath, Elias realized that sometimes the greatest wounds come not from enemies, but from those closest to us. The night was thick with silence as Elias sat alone in his room, the weight of all he'd uncovered pressing down like a storm ready to break. The betrayal, the secrets, the shadows of his father's past, they had all converged to create a crossroads from which there was no easy escape. He held the worn letter from his mother in one hand and the damning photographs in the other. Each represented a different path. Could he embrace the tangled legacy of his biological father, the mistakes, the dangers, the pain, and fight to reclaim a fractured history? Or should he forge a new future, separate from the shadows, defined only by the family that had nurtured him despite the lies? The decision tore at his heart. Downstairs, voices drifted up. Anne, Marcellus, and Jonah. They had come to understand that this moment was Elias's alone, but their presence was a steady comfort. At last, Elias rose and joined them. The room was warm with understanding, each face reflecting hope and strength. "I choose to carry both," Elias said quietly, "the past and the present, the pain and the love. I will not run from who I was or who I am." Anne smiled through tears. "That is the bravest choice of all." Marcellus nodded, pride shining in his eyes. "We walk that path with you." With newfound clarity, Elias reached out to his biological father once more, not as a son burdened by secrets, but as a young man ready to build a bridge over the wounds of the past. The journey ahead would be difficult, but Elias no longer faced it alone. His family, both chosen and born, stood beside him. As dawn broke over the horizon, light spilled through the windows, promising a future where love, forgiveness, and hope could finally take root. The journey had been long and winding, marked by silence, pain, and unanswered questions. But as Elias stood with his family beneath the morning sun, he understood that the most powerful stories are not those of perfection, but of resilience. Life is rarely simple. Families are forged not only by blood, but by love, sacrifice, and the courage to face hard truths. Sometimes the deepest wounds come from those we hold closest, and sometimes the path to healing begins with forgiveness, not just of others, but of ourselves. Elias's story is a testament to the human spirit's capacity to rise, rebuild, and renew. To anyone carrying the weight of the past, remember this: your mistakes do not define you. Your pain can become your strength. And the courage to seek forgiveness, whether from others or yourself, is the first step toward freedom. Family is not about perfection. It is about commitment, honesty, and the willingness to walk together through darkness into light. So, no matter where you are on your journey, hold fast to hope. Embrace your story, with all its scars and beauty. Because within every broken piece lies the possibility of wholeness. And like Elias, you can choose not only to survive your past, but to create a future filled with love, healing, and endless possibility. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you loved it and you would love for more, kindly comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more amazing content. Drop a comment with your favorite moment, and I'll see you in the next one.